Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Tuesday, February 11th edition of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, 𝗬𝗏𝗄𝗆, coming to you from the WellPoint Studios here in beautiful downtown Lowell, and I'm, once again, coming to you all alone. Nobody in that chair. I'm just talking to you out there in the viewing and listening audience. But we said we're going to do this every now and then. It's just you and I chatting about things happening in the city of Lowell and the world around us. And it's since it's Tuesday, we call these shows a 𝗧𝗿𝗏𝗄𝗆 Tuesday edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, where we'll see how many folks out there we can trigger and get all riled up, or at the very least, get them thinking about some of the things we discuss. We also got a bunch of feedback from the last couple of shows that we've done, so we're going to get to all of that. But first, let me thank our Inside Lowell Daily Pulse sponsors. Of course, Real Estate 𝗗𝗏𝗡𝗏. He is a licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. He's a certified appraiser in both of those states as well. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home or a commercial property or a business, Real Estate 𝗗𝗏𝗡𝗏 is your man. Find him online at realestateRayBooten.com. You'll also be able to find Ray sitting in that chair right there on Thursday. This week he'll be in here, so we'll chat about things happening in the real estate market with Real Estate Ray, and some other things happening in the political arena as well. Ray's not shy about sharing his opinions, and that's why we like having him here. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint. We mentioned we're coming here from the WellPoint Studios. WellPoint is the only health plan offering health care benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. We thank our friends at WellPoint. We thank Ray. And we've got a bunch of other sponsors to thank as well, and we'll tell you all about them in a couple of minutes. But let's start this 𝗧𝗿𝗏𝗄𝗆 Tuesday edition. And what I like to do on Tuesdays is a little preview of tonight's Lowell City Council meeting. It's a rather uneventful agenda in terms of council motions. I think there's only 6 of them on there, if I remember correctly. There's a bunch of manager responses that we want to talk about, and there's the beginning of the budget process for the next fiscal year, which starts July 1st. And if you go back, our second week of Inside Lowell Daily Pulses, we started doing this on January 6th. I believe it was actually January 15th. We had City Manager Tom Golden with us. And I asked him, I said, what's the tax increase rate going to be this year? We know it's early. We know they still got to work out the budget. But, you know, in those ensuing 3-4 weeks, we're now starting to see that process unfold, and the public is starting to be notified about it. But if you watch that episode, the manager told you that, you know, despite a couple of recent years of very significant tax increases, 5%, I think 3.5%, et cetera, he said he anticipates this year's tax increase to be no higher than 2.5%, leaving Lowell significantly still under the taxable levy. He could have taxed more, could tax more for a long time to come if they really wanted to. But I think this year he said he's got enough in reserves, which we're going to talk about, that we can keep the tax rate at about that 2.5% limit, and maybe even come in a little lower. We'll get into that in a little bit as well. But the 2 city council motions that were interesting to me, based on discussions that we've had here on the Daily Pulse and my other 𝗧𝗿𝗏𝗄𝗆 Tuesdays or Wing It Wednesdays editions, where Kim Scott filed 2 motions, motions 5.3 and motion 5.4, that say, request the manager explore and report on funding opportunities for gazebo repairs across the city. The second one wants the manager to explore and report on funding opportunities for upgrades to the McInerney and Olivera playgrounds. I think Kim Scott, Councilor Kim Scott, watches the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, or at least listens to it, because if you remember, part of my discussion over the last week or so has been on how much CPA, Community Preservation Act funding, is going towards outdoor spaces, outdoor recreation, aka parks in the city of Lowell. And if you remember, the answer is, boom, a giant goose egg this year in the funding that was revealed at last week's City Council meeting. There were 10 projects that are going to get CPA funding. They're going to, 4 of them are housing, 6 of them are historic preservation, but of those 6 in historic preservation, 2 of them, 33% of them, are involving housing. So 60%, 6 out of your 10 funded projects involve creating more housing in the city of Lowell rather than outdoors improving, creating outdoor space, outdoor recreation opportunities. Mind you, this is coming at a time where Councillor Noon last week also asked the city manager to explore, what would it look like? What's the potential for raising that CPA tax so we can get even more money to put towards zero towards open spaces and parks and the rest towards housing, which again, if you listened, I told you, not sure what building more housing does to preserve a community. Historic preservation, yeah. Parks, recreation, 100%. But anyway, Councillor Scott's motion, she wants to know what the funding opportunities are for repairing the gazebos across the city of Lowell and for creating upgrades in the McInerney and Oliveira playgrounds. I know one opportunity, Councillor Scott. Unfortunately, they've spent all that CPA money for 2025. You'll have to wait till next year to see if that funding opportunity pops up again. In defense of the manager and the city, they did say that because they've poured a ton of ARPA money, which we'll talk about in a second, into parks and outdoor facilities in all the neighborhoods of the city of Lowell, that they made a conscious decision not to put forward any funding, CPA funding for outdoor money this year, but they can carry it over into next year. So, Councillor Scott, maybe you don't even need a motion response. Maybe the manager can just tell you, what, next year we'll dedicate CPA funding. Just let's put in an application. That's about it. The rest of the council motions, important to somebody, obviously important to the councilors who made them or the residents who brought them up, but there's nothing there that's going to be overly controversial. Quite frankly, nothing in the entire meeting that I think is going to be overly controversial, except for one item, which we have talked about ever since the agenda came out last week. And that was a request by Councillor Vesna Noon, who last Tuesday wanted a report from the city manager and the superintendent of police regarding the city of Lowell Police Department, men and women of the Lowell Police Department, and how they treat ICE/immigration actions in the city. And we've talked about this in the last few days. Superintendent Hudon didn't waste any time getting back. That motion response was filed in last Friday's packet and will be officially revealed and discussed tonight at the city council meeting. But I want to pop it up there on the screen for you. There you see the beginning of it, and then there's a bunch of text which talks about, how the city, respects and value, the police officers respect the values and the diversity of the community, and then they in no way, shape, or form ask for anyone's immigration status, whether they come in seeking for help or that they're involved in some kind of situation which involves the police and requires some conversation. But the superintendent of police, Chief Hudon, did go on to say, but listen, immigration law falls under the purview of the United States federal government, and we have to follow those laws. And when an ICE agent, when a federal agent comes in and requests something, we have to cooperate as we are required to do by law. And I applauded the superintendent for that at the time, and I suggested that he actually say something like that, because I think it's important to kind of put people at ease a little bit about they're not running around. Lowell Police certainly is not going to run around rounding up people, asking for your immigration papers and whatnot. But it's also important to say, look, we took an oath. We took an oath of office. We're sworn to uphold the laws of the land, the United States Constitution, and we're not going to impede. We're not going to interfere with our law enforcement friends, especially those who kind of outrank us in situations where it involves immigration. And I thought the chief did a great job in writing his narrative. You can see it on the city council agenda. I'm pretty sure you're going to hear it discussed tonight on the council floor. But this was the first page of that response. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday with Melanie Gilbert from the Lowell Sun when she was with us. And she too loved the way the superintendent handled it. But notice the effective date of the City of Lowell's immigration policy. April 8th, 2015. As we told you yesterday, it has been in effect since the days of President Obama, since the first term of Donald Trump, since Joe Biden's presidential term, and now, again, it is still the same policy in Donald Trump's second term. Nothing's changed. Lowell Police pretty much does what they're supposed to do. You know, kudos to them. For those who wonder, and you know, I've seen some commentary out there on social media since we reported on the superintendent's response. You know, some folks angry on one side, on the other side, and whatnot. They're doing what they're supposed to do. I thought it was a perfectly crafted response by Chief Hudon, and I think the City of Lowell's policy is fair. It's smart. And most importantly, it follows the laws of our land. It isn't going to put the city or the men and women of the Lowell Police Department at risk of any type of federal action against them for not complying. Thankfully, the City of Lowell rebuffed a couple of efforts, if I remember correctly, to have that sanctuary city discussion. I'm glad they did, because now you're seeing that the Trump administration in D.C. is threatening to withhold funding from Boston and other communities. So I'm glad that the Lowell Police Department laid that out. Now everyone will know about it. I hope it appeases some of the folks who are out there panicking. I don't know if it will or not. There's a certain segment out there of our political world that is trying to drum up fear. There's also a segment of the opposite side that's also trying to drum up fear, I think in the hopes that some folks self-deport or get the hell out of Dodge, for lack of a better term. Everybody just kind of exhale. Let's take a deep breath. No one's coming to get you from the City of Lowell. If the feds come in, we'll deal with it when it happens. And, you know, hopefully they come in and clear out any of the criminals that are in here and kind of leave everybody else alone, families that are not doing anything illegal, and just kind of let's see how this all shakes out in Washington, D.C. before we go doing anything rash and before we go doing anything stupid, like disregarding federal orders and coming up with an even bigger problem for the Mill City. Another, manager response that I wanted to get to. Let's call up our little board here, and we'll talk about ARPA funding for the City of Lowell. The deadline to assign all the ARPA money, which, as you can see up at the top, $76 million and a little bit of change, 9,996 extra dollars there. Why they didn't just round that to 76? Round it up to 77 for Lowell, I don't know, or maybe 76,100,000, whatever. But that's the total amount that the City of Lowell got in American Rescue Plan Act funding. And they were required to determine how it would be spent by the end of 2024, which they have. They have accounted for all of it. And then the projects have to be complete by a certain time frame. And you can kind of see that as you see the top line in 2023. The city kind of requested / allocated $25.3 million, another $21.289 in 2024, and then this year another $24.5, the biggest chunk of change right in there. And then there'll be a little bit of a trickle over spent in 2026 and 2027. All of it allowable, but you can kind of see the city really kind of evenly split their ARPA funding over the first, those 3 years there, 23, 24, and 25. And then as the program wound down, they kind of got you to the total amount. One other chart in there regarding the ARPA funding. And this is, there we go. Where did the money go? By category. And you can see the little nice colors there on the chart. Too many blues, though. How do I describe that to you? This blue, that blue. That. Can we get some reds? Can we get some browns? You know, little, maybe even a black number in there, something, a pink. Look at all those shades of blue in there, and then the random green, orange, and I don't even know what that other one is, like gold, whatever you want to call it. But I digress. The largest chunk of change for ARPA funding went to the Lowell Fire Department, apparatus replacement. All those fancy new fire trucks that we've been sharing photos of that have now come into the city of Lowell. Almost $10 million worth of fire equipment has come into the city of Lowell. I would guess, I don't know if there was other safety equipment, other little stuff here and there, but I'm going to guess the vast majority of that $10 million went to those shiny, bright new, and also very expensive trucks that are out there. If I owned a company that made and sold fire trucks and custom fitted them for the specs that cities and towns were requesting, and I knew all this ARPA money was floating around, I sure as hell would have asked to raise the prices. I would have increased my costs of doing business and passed that charge on to the governments, the municipalities that are purchasing those damn things. Other places where you saw a lot of money spent, revenue replacement, $8 million. I'd be curious the explanation on that there, because it's not the premium pay. You can see premium pay up on the top left of your screen there, $1.785 million. That was the money that went kind of hazard pay for those employees who worked through COVID. They didn't have the benefit of staying at home and in their pajama pants and still collecting a salary. So I don't know what the revenue replacement was. Maybe that's accounting for lost revenues. Obviously, the city lost significant tax revenue, meals taxes, whatever other taxes they have, hotel taxes. So I'm going to guess that's what it's for, but maybe we'll get a discussion tonight. The other big chunk over there on the right side, down at the bottom, water and sewer infrastructure improvements. And I have a hunch as we look at those 2026, 2025, 2026, and 2027 expenditures that are still leaking out after 2024 of that ARPA money. My hunch is that a lot of that's going to go to those water and sewer infrastructure projects. One of the questions I remember asking Manager Golden was, well, you need a lot of work on your water and sewer lines to come into compliance with EPA and other things. We've got old infrastructure, old water and sewer pipes under our streets. Why not allocate more money? And one of the things that was explained to me was, well, that's a very long, complicated process. And there are only so many companies that can actually do that kind of work. And you've got to go through this whole government right? The procurement process, put it out for bid, review the bid, blah, 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 do all this stuff, and then schedule the work and do it in, in timing with the crews that dig up the roads, the gas company marking their thing, whatever goes into these things. So it's kind of explained to me that, holding on to that money, we would lose it because it does have to be spent by a certain period of time. And I think, I personally would have liked to have seen more money go into that water and sewer infrastructure improvements. But from what the manager explained on a previous podcast way back in the early days of Inside Lowell, was that's simply not feasible because the money has to be spent. It has to be assigned by a certain period of time, and then it has to be spent also within that certain period of time. And these are lengthy, expensive, time-consuming projects. But that's your ARPA report from the manager tonight, how much the city spent, where it was spent. It's a really detailed report. If you go look at it on lowellma.gov, look at the city council agenda, and you can see the full report. And there's a very detailed breakdown, and they got more of those fancy charts. But those were the two that jumped out to me because they were the biggest, the ones there that kind of showed you how much money, when it was allocated, and where it was allocated to. You're tuned into the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the 𝗗𝗶𝗹𝘆 Tuesday edition of the Daily Pulse here on this February 11th, 2025. Going to resume with our discussion tonight about the Lowell City Council, and I want to talk a little bit about the latest flare-up out of Washington, D.C. over the, excuse me, the cuts, as the Boston Globe and Attorney General of Massachusetts, Andrea Campbell, called them, to the money spent on research here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and throughout the country. People are going to die, we're hearing, of cancer because the Trump administration is cutting their funding. Lies, lies, and more lies. And I'll show you what the Trump administration really is cutting, and maybe it'll rile you up enough to tell people to cut the crap, stop playing games with our tax dollars, and stop enriching people who, quite frankly, make enough money as it is. They don't need extra money funneled their way, that money that should be going into research and scientific development. But first, thank you again to our Inside Lowell Daily Pulse sponsors. Of course, Real Estate Ray Booten, licensed realtor, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both of those states as well. Find them online, realestaterayBooten.com. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. As you can see by the signage behind me, behind my empty guest chair, we are broadcasting our Inside Lowell Daily Pulse from the WellPoint Studios. Thank you as well to the Washington Savings Bank, banking that feels like home. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell and southern New Hampshire since 1925. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life in Greater Lowell through impactful, strategic philanthropy. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency you've counted on since 1982. And by the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City. Thank you to all of our Inside Lowell Daily Pulse sponsors, and thank you to all of our podcast sponsors. If you want to become one, by the way, shoot me an email, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏@AOL.com. Join the ever-growing Inside Lowell family and find out how your business, your organization's message can reach the over 435,000 people who have seen the Inside Lowell website, or the 1.8 million people who have viewed our Facebook posts. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. All right, we did the ICE response. We did the ARPA spending. Here's my 𝗗𝗶𝗹𝘆 Tuesday moment for you here, and the I told you so moment. And interestingly enough, it comes from a report on cameras. Councillor Corey Robinson had filed a couple of motions in prior meetings looking into illegal dumping and how the city of Lowell can enforce it. How do we catch the people illegally dumping things? How do we prove it was them doing it? And how do we put an end to it by hopefully prosecuting these scoundrels? But what jumped out at me in the motion response here from Lloyd DeJesus, the Director of Development Services, and 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is that in 2024, the city of Lowell invested money and purchased 26 new cameras. 26 new cameras. Probably some ARPA funding was spent on that to assist in curbing illegal dumping in locations across the city. And it says we put out an RFP. We selected the vendor to procure, install the cameras at select locations. Those locations were determined via hotspot areas for dumping as identified by the DPD staff and the developmental services staff. Tells you how the cameras operate, and it tells you that they are compatible with the cameras used by Lowell police. It also tells you that any member of the public that witnesses any illegal dumping, you're encouraged to contact Developmental Services in Lowell, 978-674-4144, with any details regarding the time of the incident and a description of the vehicle, so that Lowell police can then go look at those cameras, those 26 new cameras, which are tied into their system, and can help see, somewhere between 10 and 11 p.m. this was dropped off. You go get all the cars and voila, the illegal dumpers are caught. Bravo. Except, is that all these cameras are going to be used for? Do we really want more police cameras out there? I don't know. I understand nowadays with these stupid cell phones, we're constantly under surveillance and whatnot in some way or another. I understand there are cameras spread out throughout the city, throughout the downtown. I see them, I know them, and I know that they can be used sometimes to in other crimes as well, not necessarily for catching scofflaws, right? You can see cars coming and going and maybe tie them, whatever. All good. But it's fascinating to me, the last paragraph of this report. Clothing donation bins are a valuable resource for Lowell residents to donate unwanted items instead of disposing of them in the trash. Unfortunately, the bins sometimes do become additional locations for inappropriate dumping. Various locations across the city have added signage outside of the bins to deter people from leaving items if the bin is already full. Development Services has also contacted bin owners to request that they are picked up more regularly or removed if the issue continues despite efforts to improve the situation. Staff will continue to monitor bins across the city for continued enforcement. So they don't talk about the illegal dumping of mattresses in this motion response right here. There we go. Let the camera focus in for a second. No dumping of mattresses, no dumping of paint or motor oils or any of the other stuff. But there's a full paragraph down here at the bottom, the last paragraph on the illegal dumping of clothes. I told you so. If you remember, back when this was, I think this was a ballot question, if I'm not mistaken, or it was some kind of legislation came up, but they wanted to recycle clothing along with our plastics and our papers and our cardboards and Lord knows what else they want you to recycle so they can just dump it in the ocean. They wanted us to recycle my dirty underwear and my used socks that had holes in them. No longer could I throw them away in the trash. I had to recycle my dirty underwear that had been used far too often and needed to go because I got new skivvies for Christmas or for my birthday. My wife always grabs me that stuff, by the way. I don't have to even buy them for myself. But I told you back when I was doing radio, I'm like, this is not a good idea because what you're going to have is people are going to start filling up plastic bags and just dumping them at these bins. And it's going to overflow. How do you right now you get, if you need to recycle clothing, what do you do? If you have gently used clothing, you give it away. You go to, the Goodwill truck. I do it out in Chelmsford Center. There's a truck out there that I give my stuff. You can give it to the Salvation Army. You can donate it to people in need. You start dumping this stuff in a dumpster, a bin. It's a dumpster. But instead of trash, you're putting bags of clothing or whatever else in there. These things are going to overflow when in a city of 120,000 people, you tell them you can't throw this in the trash. So what's the only legal way to get rid of it? You got to bring it to one of these bins or you got to donate it. It's nice when I'm doing it, when a handful of people are doing it, when 100 people are doing it. When 120,000 people can't throw their clothes away in the trash, what the bleep did you think was going to happen, you fools? I told you what was going to happen. And sure enough, it happened to the point where now the city of Lowell had to purchase 26 cameras and train them, it appears, by the motion response, because it only mentions clothing bins. It doesn't talk about other bins and other areas. It appears that this is a major problem, just like the idiot radio host turned idiot podcast host told you it would be. Can we just go back to some level of sanity? For the love of God, people, recycling clothing? Who the bleep wants my dirty underwear? As I asked you 4 years ago, who wants my used underwear or anybody else's used underwear? I know the FBI and the Department of Justice raided Melania Trump's underwear drawer down at Mar-a-Lago. I know they wanted her underwear, but that's for a totally different reason, perverts. Nobody wants my used underwear or my socks that have black smudges all over the bottom and holes in them. And that's why you throw them out. Why else does a man throw out underwear and socks? Because it's disgusting. Who the bleep wants to recycle it? And why are you passing laws that make me have to recycle it? Assuming I oblige with the laws. Anyway, back to our Lowell City Council meeting tonight. There's also a discussion, a presentation on free cash. Money that the city has above and beyond their budget obligations. And boy, does the city of Lowell have a lot of free cash this fiscal year. Let's go back to our graphics here and look. And there you have free cash by year in the city of Lowell. You had $30,789 in 2011. Now, mind you, that was when the bleep hit the fan with the savings and loan scandal, massive recession. Every community was in a lot of trouble. And, Bernie Lynch at the time, the city manager, was kind of dedicated towards, building up those free cash reserves because our bond ratings were starting to suffer in the city of Lowell. And you can actually see as you go forward into 2013, we were actually in the negatives on free cash. There were probably some very low tax increases there as well that led to that. But you can see from 2013, we start to recover 1.3 million, 2 million in 2014, 2.7 and some change in 2015. You can see the numbers out there. But look at the big jump in 2022. The city of Lowell had $17.78 million in free cash, spent a significant portion of that in 2023, or at least reduced it significantly, and then started building it back up in 2024 and 2025 to the point where the city of Lowell has more free cash right now than it has had in 15 years. And I would imagine in its history, that has to be the largest number that Lowell has had in his free cash account, over $21 million in free cash. Granted, a lot of that has to do with the ARPA money that we've had, and we've been able to use ARPA money on other types of things. But no wonder the city of Lowell's bond rating improved just a couple of months ago so that their interest rates on borrowing for capital projects were going to go down. But there's your free cash for the city of Lowell. Now, next slide. The major contributing factors to that free cash certification. Interest earnings, $3.5 million. Prior year excise tax on motor vehicles, $3.4 million. I never realized the city of Lowell collected that much money in excise tax receipts. Did any of you out there have any idea? $3.4 million in excise tax receipts? No wonder Maura Healey wants to increase that rate. That's a good chunk of money. She can increase that exponentially, right? Along with the candy and chocolate tax just in time for Valentine's Day. We want to let local communities increase motor vehicle excise taxes. But then there was some unencumbered and unexpended appropriation, $8.9 million in salaries for cities and schools. Don't worry, that money's going to get spent. It's not coming back to the taxpayers. I can guarantee you that money will be spent. But the number that jumped out at me again was the $3.5 million in interest earnings. And the reason that was interesting to me was a couple of weeks ago, City Councilor 𝗗𝗶𝗶𝗴𝗏𝗆 had a motion on the agenda and a brief discussion. We're still waiting, I think, for that report. But he asked the city manager how the city distributes its money into various bank accounts. I don't know how many banks the city uses. There's a number of banks here in the city of Lowell. number of banks in Greater Lowell, and there are a number of banks nationally as well. But Dick Howe Jr. had written on one of his Substacks the laws regarding how you're supposed to handle that money, and whether you know, what banks you put it in, what criteria you're supposed to use. And he cited how that's not supposed to be a political process. That's supposed to be a strictly business process. How much money can I make if I put X amount of dollars in X bank? And how does it compare to whether I put X amount of dollars in Y bank? And so on and so forth. So Councillor Belanger motion did trigger my memory. And do you guys remember back, we're going back about 15 years ago. One of the banks that had a downtown location, which they no longer have, at least in that location on John Street, the Lowell 5 had a bank location, a branch on John Street, and they had a parking lot. And they would allow the city of Lowell to use that parking lot to put up, I believe it was a sponsor tent or a corporate tent, and host a party for the VIP sponsors, the ones who donated the most amount of money, for Winterfest. Forgive me, the year escapes me, but I remember the political battle that ensued very well, because I was doing the morning show at the time. But it appears that the Lynch administration, Bernie Lynch was the manager, forgive me, I don't know who the treasurer was at the time, put money in other banks, out of the city banks, out of town. I don't know where these banks were, but the folks at the Lowell 5 were upset that they didn't feel that they got a fair amount of money from the city. And they're like, hey, listen, we're a local bank. We sponsor events like Winterfest. We're letting you have a corporate tent here. We donate to other causes and yada, yada. And all the banks do, right? Enterprise does it, and Washington Savings Bank, besides giving me a mug, they support all the local events. I think Eastern Bank does, all these others. So, but the idea behind that battle with then manager Bernie Lynch was, hey, listen, these are local banks, support the local banks, and put the money in the local banks. Now, that's assuming that the outside banks, for lack of a better term, and again, I don't know where these banks are located today or where they were located back when this battle took place. And I don't want to ask, because in full disclosure, my cousin is the treasurer in the city of Lowell, and I believe he has the authority to decide where that money is deposited / spent. Now, I don't know if he does that in conjunction with the city manager or with the CFO or whatever, and I'm not touching that. I try to keep my family's business separate from what I do here, but sometimes it does intersect because of that motion, because of this report, and because it triggered my memory for the controversy back then. But again, so the city, now I don't know how that $3.5 million in interest earnings compares to what it was last year or the year before or 5 years before, or go back to the time when the Bernie Lynch situation was happening and the local banks upset. I'm hoping, because I don't want to ask this question, because again, it involves a family member, and I'm not mixing family and business. He can get into enough trouble on his own. He doesn't need his older cousin to get him in trouble. But I'm hoping that tonight, a city councilor asks that question, because I think if I haven't had this conversation with Councilor Belanger yet, I was going to last week, but unfortunately he had to reschedule with us. But I'm going to guess that Councilor Belanger was trying to get back to that point where we were with Bernie Lynch and saying, hey, put the money in local banks. And, because they, after all, they support our local fundraisers, whether it's Winterfest, Folkfest, City of Lights, assuming, of course, that the banks where the money earned $3.5 million in interest aren't donating to these causes. If they're not, then perhaps they should. But how does that number, $3.5 million in interest earnings, compare to previous years? And you wonder, how do you evaluate a treasurer? Well, maybe this is one way, right? Money's not disappearing. Money's actually multiplying. Again, the city had $76 million in ARPA funds. So if that money was put into savings accounts, because you saw, remember that other chart, you didn't spend all of the 76 million in 1 year. You spent 25 million in one, 25 in another, blah, 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 blah. So what do you do with that extra money? Well, you put that extra money in a bank account, and you earn as much interest as you can for the taxpayers of Lowell. So you can have your highest free cash certification and money in there. But I'm hoping to one of the city councilors, because again, I don't want to be the one to ask these questions. If you watch this before tonight's city council meeting, can somebody ask these questions? How does that money compare to previous years? And is the rate of return that we're getting, is the interest rate of return where the money was invested higher than what it would have been if it was invested somewhere else? Because then you can figure out the difference and say, okay, well, if Bank X donates $10,000 to the Folk Festival and Winterfest and the City of Lights, great. I mean, we should value that, and we should try to give them money. But if their interest rate is so low that we're making $25,000 or $500,000, whatever that number is, by investing it in Y Bank that maybe is located, I don't know, in Rockland. Sorry, that number popped out of that location popped out of my head. But, you know, these are important questions to ask. But ultimately, for the taxpayers of Lowell, you know, feeling good, supporting local, all of that matters. But when it comes to hard-earned cash, and $3.5 million of interest is a significant chunk of cash, we should be trying to maximize that. And if there's a slight difference between community banks, then by all means, that money should go into the community banks. Is it a big difference? I don't know. I hope somebody asks that question tonight. I really, really do, because now it's an itch that I've developed, and I've got to scratch that itch. All right, one more chart for us regarding free cash, and that's simply to highlight that the city of Lowell had to borrow almost $6 million from its stabilization fund to fund the parking enterprise. In other words, the parking enterprise, our parking garages and everything else, what it costs to operate, maintain, build parking garages in the city of Lowell, what we collect is about $6 million short last year. I think we've talked about this in the past on why the city of Lowell needs to increase its collections out there, why they increased their meterly rates, why the parking rates in the garages went up. It needed to. The city's losing its shirt on these parking garages right now because just not enough people are using them. And with the new one up there in the Hamilton Canal Innovation District, and still not enough business and not enough residents living there, and not enough business development there yet, that garage is still relatively empty. Plus then 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗴𝗴𝗏 went and built his and took some revenue away. Although my understanding is he's not making a profit on his either. There just isn't enough volume there for those garages. The hope is that there will be, but for now, the City of Lowell Parking Fund is hemorrhaging money. And if you go back and watch previous podcasts, we did one with Terry Ryan, the City of Lowell's parking director, and we got into a lot of these numbers, as we have with Manager Golden in previous podcasts going back years. That has to improve. Otherwise, that $21 million in free cash is all going to end up in the damn parking enterprise fund. Pretty sure that $6 million of it will for just the last year alone. All right. Last thing I want to talk about before wrapping it up on this Trigger 'em Tuesday. I see you out there on Facebook. You're all verklempt. Cancer research is being slashed by the evil orange-haired ogre, Donald Trump. He is cutting the amount of money that is being sent to our colleges and our universities, who are doing invaluable research on everything from cancer to climate change, blah, 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 blah. But specifically, the alarm is being sounded by Attorney General Andrea Campbell here in Massachusetts over NIH, the National Institute of Health funding, that is being cut by the evil Trump administration. Is that the same funding that funded the Wuhan lab, by the way, where the coronavirus? I digress. But here's a learning moment for you folks. Whenever politicians start railing about something, always ask a question. Now, they may be 100% right, but always wonder, are you getting the true story? Did you get the true story in the Boston Globe when they wrote about this and they told you that the money is being slashed and all sorts of public health issues were going to be put at risk? Even cancer money was going to be put at risk. They always use that cancer word to really scare you and wonder, what the heck is going on out there. One more trusty graph for you, my friends, and pardon me for a second here, because I'm doing this on my own. But research grants. This graph appeared on Twitter, the new media, the only place where you can probably get a balanced, people from both sides of an issue giving you their points of views. The Boston Globe story and Andrea Campbell's story were certainly on Twitter. That's where I found out about them losing their mind over the cancer money being cut. But as you dig a little bit deeper, you will find that what is being cut isn't the funding. We don't know if the funding is being cut, if the actual dollars spent are being funded or redistributed. That we don't know yet. I'm going to guess there's a little bit of both. I'm going to guess they're going to be significantly cut and they're going to be redistributed significantly as well. But check that graph out right there on your TV right there. This is good old Harvard with a $53.2 billion endowment. Harvard University has $53.2 billion available to it. And next to that column, you see old NIH indirect rate of 69%. Do you know what that is? That is how much money Harvard skims from the top of research grants to fund administrative and other costs. In other words, when the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, give Harvard University a research grant, only 31%, less than 1/3 of that money, goes towards the actual research. 69% goes to administrative costs, salaries. Again, every college needs a chancellor, and they should be highly paid. Needs an assistant chancellor, a vice chancellor, a provost here or there, 2 vice chancellors, 2 provosts. But look at any academia organizational chart and look at how top heavy it is. Well, you get 69% of a research grant, you can fund an awful lot of academic administration, can't you? You don't get to fund all that much research, though, do you? The Trump administration has declared that your new indirect, the maximum rate allowable for administrative costs is 15%. Why is that? Why is that so offensive to Andrea Campbell? Does she not know? Has she fallen for the propaganda, the scare tactics, the fear-mongering? Does she not know that what the Trump administration is saying, hey, Harvard, you need some money from those research grants for administrative costs, because after all, the administration, the buildings, et cetera, support the research. But 69% is obscene. 15% sounds fair. Now, is it fair? Should that number be 25? Should the number be 30? I don't know. Maybe there's a middle ground that'll make everybody happy. But I'm pretty sure 69% is a bunch of colleges and universities like Harvard, like Yale, like Johns Hopkins that you see on this list, skimming taxpayer funds and basically enriching themselves and probably sending much of that money back in campaign donations. And we certainly know where academia likes to donate its funding. The $1 million question. Where does UMass Lowell fall on that? I asked earlier this morning, and I told that they are digging up that answer for me. Unfortunately, I just checked my phone, and I do not have my answer yet. But I will, and I will publish it either on a podcast tomorrow, or I'll do it on in an Inside Lowell article, which we always share on social media. But what does UMass Lowell get? What is UMass Lowell's indirect rate? These private colleges, these Ivy League colleges, I don't want to use the word I'm really thinking, because but they are stealing from the taxpayers because they know they can, and they have been doing it forever. 69% towards administrative costs. And I'm supposed to be upset. I'm supposed to be upset about their personal piggy bank for their administration being cut down to 15%. I'm going to bet you that UMass Lowell number is far closer to 15% than the 69, 67.5, and 63.7% that these private universities with their billion-dollar slush funds that they don't want to spend, but they're happy to spend taxpayer money to support academic research. I'm going to bet you UMass Lowell and other Massachusetts public institutions numbers are far closer to the 15 than the 2/3 that these people are absolutely robbing the taxpayer blind. By the way, you know who discovered those numbers? Elon Musk and his 20-year-olds, big balls, and the rest of them. These are the evil people you're being warned about, right? These are the people who are stealing your Social Security money. They have your number, they have your ID, they have all your personal data, like Facebook does, like Twitter does, like every bank, car loan. Everybody has your data. But we're upset about Elon Musk and big balls, his 20-something-year-old Doge person. Where's the outrage for this? Can we get some outrage? Can we get a little outrage that Harvard University is robbing the taxpayers blind? All right, that's it. That's it for today's Trigger 'em Tuesday edition of the Daily Pulse. Tomorrow, Lowell School Superintendent Liam Skinner will join us. Lots to talk about with him. Lots of things going on in the Lowell Public Schools. Real Estate Ray Booten is here Thursday. School Committee candidate Danielle McFadden is here Friday. We'll talk about her candidacy. Then we'll have a little fun for Valentine's Day. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Please share it in your social media network. Tell your friends about the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse. Find us both on our website, InsideLowell.com. Just click on podcasts. Go to the Inside Lowell YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. It doesn't cost you anything. And if you become a subscriber, you can then set it up to get notifications as soon as this episode drops, and any other episode, any other Inside Lowell podcast. As soon as it drops on YouTube, you'll get a notification and you can watch it as well. Also available on all of your audio podcast services, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, you name it. It's available out there. InsideLowell.com. If Lowell is your home, this is your place. Till next time, everybody stay warm and stay safe. And get angry at Harvard University.